Hey guys, Love of the Grain Workshop here. I want to thank you for stopping in and watching this video. Today we are going to learn how to turn an old used cutting board like this into something much prettier. We're going to recondition it, refinish it. Super simple. Something you can do at home. So as you can see, this board, this is my personal board at my house. I really should take more care of it, but I use it heavily. It's a board that I use literally every day, sometimes twice a day. For cutting, for serving meat on, everything but raw meat. I don't recommend anybody cutting any raw meats or seafood on a wooden cutting board. But anything else is good to go. Cooked, cured meats, fruits, vegetables, cheeses. But as you can see, over time, there's a lot of scratches. It's pretty dull. Around the outer edges, it's sealed pretty well still. But in the inside, in the middle where it's used heavily, it is pretty worn, pretty dry. We've even got a little split action going on right here at the joint, so we're going to kind of repair that. First off, you want to make sure that it's clean from any heavy-duty oils. You see here I got a little bit of schmutz there, and over here we're going to go ahead and clean that up with some distilled white vinegar and a little bit of steel wool and elbow grease first. So we've got a nice clean piece of steel wool. This is quadruple zero, ultra fine. So it's easy on your hands, and it also is really well at cleaning up without scratching the surface too much more than it already is, even though in this case we really don't mind. So you're just gonna, again, a little bit of vinegar on there, and you're gonna scrub. This will sterilize your board as well in between use. You just have to make sure to let it dry and then reseal it. I'll show you later on what I reseal mine with. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, as I showed you at the beginning, one of the seams came a little bit, or the joints came apart a little bit. One of the things I like to use, so you can use Titebond III Ultimate Wood Glue. It is non-toxic, water cleanup. It works perfect for that, and you can sand it down and redo that. One thing you can do is you can do a little bit of the sanding and then take some of the glue and the sawdust that you've made from sanding and mix it in, and it will create a really nice filler for that. That's all natural. That'll match the wood as well. Okay, as you can see, it's cleaned up quite a bit. It's all kind of one shade now, so we got rid of some of that surface oil and grit that was on there. So some of the parts I want to fill right here, there's a little gouge, and then there's a little bit of gouging right here, and then that one spot right here. Nothing major, real minor stuff. A little bit right there maybe. So what I'm gonna do first though, I wanna use the Titebond way to go with that. I'm gonna show you how to do that. You can get that at any local hardware store. I'll put a link in there too to Amazon where you can get it directly to you with Prime pretty quickly. But it's real simple. We're gonna go ahead and sand this first. Now you can hand sand this. Takes a little bit more time, but it doesn't matter. Again, you wanna go with the grain of the wood. So I'm gonna show you, this is the grain, the long grain of the wood. You can see the lengths going that way. It's not going this way. If I turned it, obviously it would go that way, but you always want to sand with the grain of the wood. You don't want to go crossways on it. You're going to start with a heavier grit, say like a 120 or 100, and you're going to work through that. Then to get rid of those scratches, you're going to go down to another step, which would be about a little bit finer, maybe a 140, 160, and then a 220. I usually go to 220, maybe 300 or 400 on these, and then you'll do that, and then we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to show you by hand how to do it, and then I'm going to grab my sander, because if you got a little palm sander, it works perfectly as well. So that was hand sanding with a little block piece of paper. They do make a little backing for this. Again, I'll have the link in the description for that, that this attaches to make it a little bit easier on your hands. But as you can see, it's starting to do its magic. You're starting to see some of the scratches go away. If you've got really deep scratches, it's gonna take a little bit of time, quite a bit of elbow grease to get rid of those. You might wanna start with like an 80 and then go to a 120 grit. But for the sake of saving time in my elbows, I'm going to show you how I do it with my sander. Again, this is kind of a fancy sander. You don't have to use a fancy sander. You can use any 5-inch palm orbital sander. I'll put a link into one on the website. or in the description below that you'll be able to see, and it'll make it go 10 times quicker. Okay, so you can already see just with the 120, that was about 10 minutes worth of work with my sander. It's already looking really good. It's bringing out the natural colors of that wood again without the oils on it. Some beautiful coloring. This beautiful red African Padauk that I put in there. It's kind of oranges, carrot orange and red in some areas, as you can see. Really brings out the natural colors again prior to the oiling. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get all your major knife marks out with the first grit, the heaviest grit, because as you go down in grit, you're basically getting rid of the scratches that the previous grit makes, not of more knife marks. So your heaviest grit, you need to get all your little knife marks out of. If you look real close, you'll see some little swirl marks. That's okay. That's left over from the sandpaper, which is why you go down or up to higher grits so that you get rid of those. So once you get rid of all your knife marks, go ahead and dust it off a little bit. And then we're gonna move on to the next grit. And actually, before we do that, we're gonna go ahead and fill our gaps. We're gonna go ahead and put some of our glue in those little gaps. I'll show you how we fill them in. So we're just gonna pour just a touch in there. Smear them with your fingers. Then I'm going to take some of the sawdust, which is sitting here on the table, on the surface of our table, and we're just going to dust it over it and then smear it in. So that's going to act like a natural wood filler for the wood. It's going to match in color pretty well. Here's some underneath the board too. And again, just kind of work it in to the crack with the glue all in there. Don't worry about anything that gets on the surface. After it dries, we're going to sand that off. Okay, so we've got those filled now. All the little spots, the little crevices that we had filled with the glue and the sawdust, they're dry. I went ahead and sanded the edges. This was, again, just to 120. I'm now gonna step it up to 220, and we'll come back and show you what it looks like after that. All right, so as you can see, this is up to the 220. Most of those little teeny swirl marks are gone. See a few left over from the 220, but they're even finer than they were before. I'm gonna go one step further with the 400. You don't necessarily have to. This is really smooth. And again, those are very minuscule scuffs and scratches when you oil it. Those will mostly all disappear completely. I just like a really smooth board. One trick I'm gonna show you is a trick that a lot of carpenters use to get ultra finish wood or ultra soft finishes on wood. What you're gonna do is you're gonna get a spray bottle, fill it with water, and we're gonna douse it wet. This is called popping the grain. So what it does is any tiny little grains that you got on there that are loose or that are on the surface of the wood that are laying flat, after you sand, it'll feel real smooth. But once you wet it, those grains are gonna stand back up. And so this allows those grains to stand back up, to kind of float in the water, and then let it dry. They'll stand up straight, and then you can sand it again with your finest grit, 220, 300, 400, whatever you want to use. I'm going to use 400. And then it will sand those loose pieces off, making it for a extra smooth, extra soft finish on the wood, so that when you go back and oil it, if you get it wet later on, when you're cutting some freshly washed vegetables or something, it doesn't get roughness on it. That's just how wood works. So we'll let this dry, and then we're gonna go ahead and put the last grit on and sand it down. All right, so we fine sanded that to 400. You wanna blow that off and dust it off really well. Obviously, if you've used the other side, I don't on this one, flip it over. You can also do that side as well, using the same process, same steps. The best thing to do now is to seal. You want to seal the wood with something that's going to be food safe, and then seal those pores really, really well. I use a board butter that I make myself, which is beeswax and mineral oil, all completely food safe and easy to use. Comes out to this kind of a paste that you can wax on. And what that's going to do is all these little pores in the wood, it's going to seal them really well. It's going to put that oil in there that the wood desperately needs to keep dry, and then the beeswax is going to fill in any gaps and any tiny pores, and that is going to keep food out of there. Most important thing you can do to any board is to keep it sealed, because you want to keep food out of the pores. That is where bacteria is going to grow, is in those pores. So you really want to seal it well. We will polish this on, let it absorb a bunch of it, and then polish it off. Any excess that's on the surface, and it'll be ready to use. Before I forget, so a couple tips for sanding. When you're sanding by hand, again, you want to go with the grain of the wood, back and forth with the grain of the wood, along the grain of the wood. With a sander, with a random orbital sander, what you want to do is you want to go one way, up and back, the whole way, go nice and slow, and then come back and go the opposite direction, making sure you cover the whole area, overlapping a little bit, probably 25% or so on each pass for sanding. You can also, to help you go smooth and slow like you're supposed to, you can mark the surface with a pencil, and then as you sand, remove that pencil mark, knowing you've covered every area and that you're covering it in the length of time you need to properly get it sanded down. That's another little tip that a lot of woodworkers like to use. So let's go ahead and seal this baby. Just look at the difference in that board. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Like new, restored, no knife wounds, enhancing that beautiful wood grain back to life. And now it's food safe and ready to go. I'll have links and descriptions for everything I've used, as well as a link to my website, and you should be able to find this on there as well. Well, I really hope that this video has helped you to be able to fix your own and restore your own cutting board, butcher block. Any of these techniques can be used on wooden utensils as well. If you've got some that are dingy, that are worn out, give it a light sand. You can do those by hand and then seal with that board oil, board butter. Wooden bowls, if you got some wooden salad bowls that are unfinished, things like that, you can do the same thing to those. Any butcher blocks, cutting boards, charcuterie boards, all that kind of stuff. I really want to thank you for watching this video, for hanging out with me. Go ahead and like the video if you did like it. Leave us some comments below and hit that subscription bell so that you can get notified every time we post new videos. Check out my website. It's in the description below, as well as my other videos here on YouTube. I really appreciate all that you guys do. Thanks so much. Love of the Grain Workshop. I'm Tim. Bye.